Okay, thank you. So welcome everyone that is connected at this hour today on this webinar on European citizens education or citizenship education. Um, this is a strategic topic, very fundamental for European integration, so it is not a minor topic. It is very typical to talk in Europe. Please unmute your mics if they are not unmuted. It is very typical to talk about the democratic deficit in the European Union. I'm sure you have heard about that many times for a long time. There is probably still some gap, not as much as in the past. Think of when the European Parliament, for example, was not elected by the popular vote. But certainly what we have, and it is a much bigger deficit, I will argue, is the knowledge and the communication deficit. And I will say that the vast majority of European citizens are not really familiar with the European Union as a project, as a with the different institutions, the different roles of the institutions, the origins. To some extent, they may not be fully aware of all the rights that are, offered by being a citizen of the European Union, and the benefits that go with it. And to discuss this, we have a great panel today that I will introduce in a little bit. I think that one of the reasons why citizenship education is becoming more and more present in education policy agendas has to do with the fact that there seems to be also disconnect between the policy discourse and concrete action. Also, the CUL committee, of which I am member in the European Parliament, is going to carry out an implementation report on what has been done at the EU level on citizenship education. I think it's very little. This is my impression. And but we'll see, because I'm the rapporteur of this file. I think the Commission loves to run activities under the exchanges of best practices, shuttle people around in seminars here and there, but honestly, I think this is not very meaningful. Those are drops in the ocean, and what we need is systemic approaches to this topic. And we need also some courage from the Commission, because they are not invading or being intrusive of national competencies by offering proposals in this field, including a curriculum proposal. So we'll discuss about that, the curriculum, linking delivery of this content to funding opportunities, other non-formal approaches to European citizenship education, the role of education and training in the context of the Conference on the Future of Europe, and also what can we do in the conference also to advance this agenda. So thank you very much to our excellent four panelists. First of all, we have Suzanne Sells. Suzanne is the founder of Values Unite. It's a non-partisan initiative advocating to enhance democratic competences and the promotion of European values. And Suzanne has also been promoting the establishment of a European agency for citizenship education, but I will not preempt her presentation. Then we have Professor Castaldi. Roberto is an associate professor of political philosophy at EU Campus University and director of research and communication in the International Center for European and Global Governance, and a member of the Italian section of the European Federalists, an organization of which I am a vice president. Then we have Professor Hoeksma from the Netherlands, a good friend, philosopher of law and director of Eurono, and also the creator of the board game Eurocracy. that is in his background. Then Marta Fuentes is the education officer of the Erasmus Student Network of Spain, one of the main associations working to support and promote international exchange and learning in Spain, but also part, of course, of the broader European student network at the European level. So we are going to start. I'm going to give our very distinguished panelists 10 minutes each for the presentation. And after the 4 presentations, we will open up to questions from the audience. So, Susan, you go first. You have recently published the paper Safeguarding European Values, Case for a European Agency for Citizenship Education, in collaboration with the European Policy Center. The paper explores how the EU approaches citizenship education and possible platforms for promoting its teaching. Your proposal to establish this agency has already promoted a needed debate among policymakers. So, thank you very much for your commitment, for your proposal, and for being with us. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And I was very glad to hear that you were saying that we need a systematic change to approaching citizenship education, which is exactly what I have tried to initiate with Values Unite. Maybe let me just say a couple of words about how this initiative has come about. We founded it last summer. I myself have been working and implementing projects in citizenship education in Berlin, in Germany, at a grassroots think tank called Polis 180. And I was collaborating a lot with other organizations from other member states. And this is where I saw how very diverse the setting of citizenship education funding and structures is across the EU. And this is how I have come about to launch this initiative. As Dominic just pointed out, our goal is to advocate to enhance democratic competences and promote European values. And maybe I can just quickly start off by saying why I believe the EU should reinforce investment in citizenship education and democratic infrastructure. On the one hand, I just pointed out it's the very unequal access to citizenship education we see for EU citizens, which is currently the case across Europe. And having unequal access to citizenship education also translates into having unequal access to participating in political and social life. So when we speak about opportunities such as the conference of the future on the future of Europe, those are opportunities to participate, but not all citizens are equally equipped with the skills and knowledge to access such opportunities. And this is, I think, a very strong argument why we should be more active in this field. On the other hand, the EU very much relies on citizens to practice and safeguard European values in the member states. We see that there's member states violating such values, and I strongly believe that while we can sanction certain governments, it is the citizens in the member states which will have to be ready to practice and safeguard those values. We very much rely on them to be sort of our guardians of those values in the member states, which is why we should promote them. And then last but not least, in times of crisis and transformation, and we are currently in both of those times, unfortunately, democratic competences are essential for the resilience of the EU. So we can only ask citizens to join us on journeys such as climate protection or pandemic crisis protection if they are capable of joining this transformation. And this is also why we should very much invest in these competencies. The proposal we've made at Values Unite very much implements existing recommendations at the EU. I know it sounds very bold to be saying there should be a new agency, but if we look at what has been already agreed upon and declared at the European level, we see that this is already consensus, really. The Council recommendations from May 2018 on key competences for lifelong learning, for example, very much state that we should foster the development of citizenship competences with the aim of strengthening the awareness of common values as referred to in Article 2 of the Treaty of the EU and the Charter of Fundamental Rights. So this has already been declared in many various EU documents, and I feel now we are only lacking the implementation measures to really step up our efforts in this field. I, in the paper that Dominic mentioned, have outlined some of the milestones which we have in the past already achieved in reaching more activity, EU activity in citizenship education. One which I would like to point out is the Paris Declaration from 2015, where all member state education ministers already signed a declaration very much stressing that they wish to strengthen this education policy field. But what we are still seeing that it has a marginal role to play in many EU programs. I believe that currently we are very much investing in citizens' ability to participate in the labor market at EU level, but I would wish for EU policy, education policy, to equally invest in their ability to participate in the democratic life of the Union. So we've come up with some recommendations as to what the EU could specifically do to foster citizenship education. On the one hand, I believe there should be a comprehensive European strategy for citizenship education, because as I mentioned, there's various declarations, there's various strategies. So the youth strategy will, for example, touch upon citizenship education, also the lifelong learning strategy and other documents, but we are kind of lacking a comprehensive idea of what specifically we want to do for citizenship education. So perhaps the report that Dominic mentioned could be one of the stepping stones towards such a strategy. On the other hand, I believe that the EU should look for the member states to implement the Council of Europe's Charter from 2010, which also has very good recommendations in there on what to do to support citizenship education on national level. And I feel we need more frequent and in-depth monitoring to really evaluate the access and the quality of citizenship education. There is some monitoring and evaluation out there, and we already can see based on that there is great diversity across the EU, but it's very difficult to, for example, assess what is the access or quality in the non-formal and informal sector. But if we say we really wish to strengthen lifelong learning also in citizenship education, this is something we need to get a better understanding of in the first place. And I also would like to recommend developing something like a democratic competence indicator to provide guidance to member states to enhance national efforts in citizenship education. And this democratic indicator could, of course, also covers specifically the European dimension of citizenship education, because there also we see great diversity of how much this dimension is covered in the national education systems. Then I would like to suggest for more investment in training and capacity building programs for educators themselves. This is something that many studies always point out, that we simply lack capacity for this field, really. And maybe one last recommendation, we should really also reinforce political media literacy and the digital citizenship competences. We see that our lives, all aspects of our lives, are progressively being digitalized, and this means that we very much also need to focus on this digital citizenship competence. the proposal we've made to establish a European platform, supportive platform. We've called it an agency, but basically we want one institution in the EU to be there to really facilitate and promote the development of citizenship competences. And the objectives of this institution should be securing equal access to citizenship education, first of all, then secondly, to improve the quality of citizenship education. And the third objective would be to foster innovative and digital learning methods. This has become, I believe, very important, especially during the crisis. We have seen how important distance learning has become, but also how much potential there is in using more digital learning methods to reach more people, maybe also in rural areas where we currently do not have as many education opportunities. So this is something that the EU could definitely also focus on in its efforts. Maybe one last point that I would like to make is, what could such an institution concretely do? We've envisioned an institution which would on one hand be a dialogue platform, so have a network of all the citizenship educators out there to provide knowledge transfer and exchange of best practices. I feel we can always benefit from this. For example, there is election tools which have been developed in the Netherlands and then were brought to Germany, bringing them to further member states, or sharing other effective tools for citizenship education is something that such a dialogue platform could provide. Then also a learning hub. So this learning hub should provide a database of existing learning materials, methods, and digital tools, and really actively disseminate them across the EU. So, for example, the game that was mentioned in the introduction from Dominic, this could be something that would then be actively disseminated across the EU through this database. The monitoring, I've already mentioned, this should also be part of this institution, and then really providing funding and resources for capacity building. And one last aspect is that there should also be a policy dialogue platform to facilitate mutual learning among member states at the policy level, and develop cooperation with member states by having reference materials and tools for citizenship education. So this could also mean, for example, an indicative curriculum. I'll leave it at that. That was a quick overview of what we've suggested, and I'm happy to elaborate in the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susanne, also for sticking to the time, 10 minutes exactly. I will not make any joke about you being from Germany, but excellent presentation and already some good takeaways. First, we don't have right now a European strategy on citizenship education. So this is something that we can do and the Commission can do. And again, Commission don't come to tell us that you're invading any competence for writing a strategy. Then the question of the rule of law that you mentioned at the beginning, which is connected to this. And there is now a new field emerging on rule of law education, which is very good because we need it also in view of what is happening in some member states. And obviously, rule of law is part of this. Unmute your microphones, or mute, or my team, please unmute microphones.
But kind of particular point to note, I think here is the EP store, the Santa group, which I think.
Please, someone could unmute. I don't know who the microphone. Yeah, I think it's good now. Okay, so, but of course, rule of law education is part of citizenship education. So here, I think we have a very good link. Now, of course, also taking into account that we have a big necessity in this field. We have a contradiction because obviously no one is better placed than the European institutions to develop citizenship education as it regards the European dimension, but the treaties give exclusive competency in education to member states. But this is a bit of a contradiction because at least in the European dimension, I will say there is an implicit competency that we have to find a way to develop in the context of in the context of the current treaties, or I think this should be a big discussion in the conference on the future of Europe, because I don't want Brussels. I understand that Brussels has plays no role in the mathematics curriculum or the natural science curriculum in a member state, but in European citizenship, it's not possible to say that this is something that only member states can define and develop. But I will not go further into my own comments. I give now the floor to Roberto Castaldi, a friend and a companion. He has extensive theoretical knowledge on European citizenship, having written extensively about the topic. For example, he edited the special issues Rethinking EU Citizenship in the journal Perspectives on Federalism. He has also practical knowledge, having been at the forefront of designing himself modules for European citizenship education. So this combination makes him, I think, particularly relevant to today's discussion. So, Roberto, the floor is yours for another 10 minutes.
Thank you very much, Dominic, for the invitation, and thanks to the other colleagues and the participants to the seminar, which is on a really crucial topic in my view. I'll stress two issues. Now, the need. The Eurobarometer shows that many European citizens know very little about the European Union, and often little knowledge means less trust in the EU and the European institution. And if we look at the extensive amount of work done by Eurydice, it shows that European citizenship education is not systematically taught in all member states. So I think that it would be very useful to launch a debate and possibly an initiative on European citizenship education within the context of the Conference on the Future of Europe, or as a result of the debate in the Conference on the Future of Europe. The point is, what should be the content of a European citizenship education curricula? What should be the goal? And I think from this perspective, the European Union, in a sense, is a quasi-federal multi-level system of government. And therefore, when we think about citizenship education, we must think about multi-level active citizenship. This should be the goal of any citizenship education at European level and in the member states. Because in a sense, we have values, history, institution, culture that can contribute to European citizenship and identity, which is different from a national one that builds more on language and other aspects. And also, when we talk about the European Union and also about European citizenship, we need to think about the EU as both a project and a resource. Very often, institutional activities think about the EU only as a resource. So they only speak about what the EU can offer and about the success story. But we need to put aside the success-failure narrative, in my view, because the pro-European always see the EU as a success and the nationalists always see the EU as a failure. The reality is that the EU is an incomplete project, which has successes and failure, which has strengths and weaknesses. And if we are to train and educate citizens in a critical way, we need to acknowledge the fact that the EU is not a perfect system of government, and that we need to think about it as a project in the making, in which the citizens have a role to play. And this is why we need also European citizenship education. And as the speaker before suggests, we need a comprehensive strategy. That is, we need a European policy. Now, to be a policy, in my view, it needs to do two things. On the one hand, to exploit top-down activities, and on the other hand, to exploit bottom-up initiatives. Which means, on one side, to strengthen the existing tools, like the Jean Monnet Action, the Altiero Spinelli Prize, the Europe for Citizens Action, which are the more related to European citizenship education inside the Erasmus Plus or other programs. From this point of view, the Altiero Spinelli Prize was a pilot project, and it's still unclear if it will be if it will become a structured one, and this can be one of the issues on which the Parliament can make a difference, because it was a pilot project that was asked by the Parliament to the Commission. Then we need to exploit potential synergies with other aspects like European Heritage Label, European Remembrance, and other actions that exist. And finally, we need to exploit systematically existing best practice, and I will make a few examples I know, but there are many others. I'm not sure if the best way is to create a brand new agency or to create a specific unit within the current agency, the European Agency for Culture, Education and Audiovisual, which is the one that is currently running the Erasmus Plus, the Europe for Citizens, European Remembrance, and so on. But all as different action, not within a coherent strategy. These are two possible ways to reach the same goal. And here are some proposals. The first is to have a virtual learning environment on European citizenship education with different courses tailored for general citizens, with courses like EU for Dummies, in a sense, some for students, some for teachers, that can help provide a platform on European citizenship education. The second one that is linked to the first is to make it compulsory to have a short online module of European citizenship education in all EU-funded training courses. Because nowadays, in each member state, through the European Social Fund and other structural funds, there are thousands of training courses on all kinds of issues that are funded by the EU, and the only element linked to the EU is the logo, with the flag and the written with the support of the EU. This is not enough. It doesn't make sense that people can have free training courses on anything, web design, other kind of courses, but have no idea whatsoever of the European Union, which is actually financing that training. Then we need to think about these agencies as a facilitator, providing partnerships with National Ministry of Education in order to spread the communication about this virtual learning environment so that the different education system can really exploit it. Then they can maybe exploit other projects that are being run in various countries. For example, now in Italy, there is a project about the valorization of the Ventotene and Santo Stefano Island, which is led also by Silvia Costa, a former MEP very active in the CULT committee. And of course, this can be, this project aims at having citizenship education on European issue in the island, which has a very symbolic meaning for Europe, due to the Ventotene Manifesto by Spinelli, Rossi, and Colorni. And I think there can be a lot of synergy to host there a number of activities at the European level in a very symbolic place, which has a strong meaning. And then, for example, exploit a format very innovative like the European Awareness Day. So let me very briefly exemplify some of these things that there are some examples already. A virtual learning environment for European citizenship. There is one in 5 languages. It's called Awerio. I'll put the link in the chat. And it hosts 4 different courses. One for citizen explaining the EU with 8 lessons of 20 minutes. Very short, very smart. Then there is a course of 12 lessons for students about the history of the EU, and 2 courses for communicators, those who want to understand more about the EU, about the challenges, and for teachers about teaching European citizenship education. This is the result of a pilot project by the Italian government, the European Commission, and Parliament, for which CESUE, my think tank, had the task of providing the national experts. And as often happens in Italy, the pilot project never gets into becoming a structural one. So we took the result of the pilot project and made an Erasmus Plus project, creating this virtual learning environment, which is online, is free, and can be used and could be upgraded to other languages. And we would be happy to put it at the disposal of the European Union, also because it's a result of a European project, so the Union can take it as well. Of course, this should be linked to monthly or weekly newsletter to all the people taking this course, so to create an element, a connection with the EU, with a newsletter providing info, European citizenship, calls, consultation, and so on. And this can be a tool. Then, the EU-funded training course have this short online compulsory module. An example is on that virtual learning environment. It's important to have a centralized implementation, in my view, for 2 reasons. First, to reduce the cost, and second, to ensure the quality, because we need to have this course to be very short, and because the training course can be on very different things, and people wouldn't be willing to take a long course on European citizenship, need to be very smart and effective. And if we distribute it in a decentralized way, this would cost a hell amount of money, and eventually this wouldn't happen. And again, link it to a newsletter. And then the European Awareness Day. This is a format we created and exploited very successfully, but there can be many others. This is just an example. It includes a musical recital on the EU, which involves the audience emotionally, and is followed by a short talk or roundtable and debate with the audience. We staged this in big theater. We had over 1,300 participants in some of these, and some were broadcasted by national television. So these are formats that are very effective, entertaining, and in the afternoon then they are accompanied. We do it in the morning for school students, for example, and in the afternoon they are accompanied by training courses for teachers and deliberative workshop for local civil society and academia. This kind of format can be very effective because with the Through TV they can reach larger audience, beside the fact that each one got over 1,000 participants. So this is something that can be used, for example, to run a big communication and education campaign before the European election, for example, and then we do it one in every country, and then we broadcast it on the 9th of May, followed by, for example, the Spitzencandidate debate. This could be a massive campaign of communication and citizenship education, very effective. And we did this in several European countries, in Italy, Spain, Portugal, Poland, France, and the UK. And we saw that it works very well. There can be other examples. I speak about those that I know, but I think that there are on the ground best practices that we could take and exploit at centralized level for very effective European citizenship education campaign. So thank you very much for your attention. I'll put some link in the chat so that if you are interested, you can have a look at this kind of thing. Thanks a lot.
Many thanks, Roberto. Also, good presentation in the required time frame. And I think there is an important, at least one very important takeaway that I think has systemic importance, which is your proposal to link content on European citizenship education when delivering EU training opportunities. I think this is very important because, as you mentioned, we have the European Social Fund, maybe also to some extent Erasmus Plus. And this is training that reaches many millions of people across the Union, and that is funded by the European Union. So it should be simple, and it shouldn't pose, I think, a problem from the point of view of primary law or treaty to say, okay, you are going to take a course on electricity or on plumbing or on web design, on whatnot. But you also have to take this 1 hour or 2 hour module on, European citizenship education. So I think this is really a very powerful systemic idea, and we have to, to promote it, to discuss it with Maria Gabriel for sure. Alongside the idea of the agency or of the unit, we can think about that, but it is true that we need a dedicated structure, as Susan said in the first presentation. So now we move to another friend, Jaap Hoeksma, professor from the Netherlands and also a pro-European activist. He has been teaching and writing about European integration for a long time. Among other titles, he has published A Polity Called EU, essays on the exercise of sovereignty in the European Union and the Euro area. Jaap has also come up with a very good definition of the EU, or what the EU should be, because we have, of course, some problems in some member states. But he says that the EU is a democratic union of democratic states, and I think this is a very important idea. The states have to be democratic, and the union itself has to be also fully democratic. So, and he has also been a pioneer in teaching European citizenship by developing the board game Eurocracy that I show you here. And I think this is a new edition, but I as a child, I had in my house the edition of the, I think, early 1990s, and I remember playing with it, and maybe my interest in the EU started there. I cannot tell, I don't remember very well, but probably at an unconscious level that had an effect on my future interest. So it is a real pleasure to have you, Jaap. Of course, in the early 1990s, I didn't know who was the developer of the game. Now I know, but you have done many other things. So we're very happy to have you on this very important topic, and you have another 10 minutes.
Muchas gracias, Dominic. I'd like to participate very much in your webinar, very timely, because it also gives me the opportunity to share a post-Maastricht fairy tale on Europe with you. Because when I introduced myself as author of the book European Democracy and the game that you have, Eurocracy, most people will think that the game followed the book. In reality, it was the other way around, because as a philosopher of law, I found myself at the time of the Maastricht Treaty stuck with the question what the European Union is. Nobody could explain it, whether it was a federal state or a federal state in the making or a union of states. And since the international law have other, I sensed that Maastricht was our ab urbe condita moment for a new Europe, but I did not grasp its meaning. Fortunately, at that time, Friedrich Nietzsche has advised later generations that when you encounter a problem that you cannot solve, however hard you try, you turn it into a board game. And since the unique hallmark of the Maastricht Treaty was the introduction of citizenship of the European Union, I made the game that gives every citizen the chance to become president of the European Union. And the idea was greeted by CNN and the BBC and in Spain on Antenne 3. And I had also, prior to the referendum in France, a great review in Le Monde, and that resulted in the shop in Barcelona which bought 6 copies of the game, and one of those copies ended in the hands of an eager boy in Valencia who wanted to discover the world, and who, after he had become president of the European Union in the game, also wanted to become member of the European Parliament. Now, Dominic, you have realized your dream, but at the same time, the game has told me a very important lesson about European integration. Because when you the game and the students told me that you should not look at the EU top down from the perspective of the states, but rather bottom up from the perspective of the citizens. And once you do that, you start to realize that the option is not whether we should be a federal state or a union of confederal union of states, but you should ask the question whether an organization of democratic states, as the EU was described in 1973 in the Declaration on European Identity, can be governed in the undemocratic manner. And in the classroom, all children would shout, "No, sir, that is no way that you can do that." So you have to swap the perspective from which you look at the European Union. And when you do so, from states to citizens, and when you do so, it becomes very obvious that when 2 or more democratic states agree to share the exercise of sovereignty in a number of fields in order to attain common goals, their organization should be democratic too. So we are developing something that you could call a dual democracy, which has great consequences for the approach that we have for European citizenship education. I have in my book demonstrated that you can follow the evolution of the EU from the moment that it was called the Union of Democratic States. We had the introduction of direct elections for the European Parliament in 1979. It was followed by introduction of European citizenship in 1992. Amsterdam, democracy in the core values of the EU. The Charter on Fundamental Rights gave the new citizens a real status, which was given force of law by virtue of the Lisbon Treaty. And in my view, ever since the entry into force of the Lisbon Treaty, we can describe the EU as a democratic union of democratic states. Now, are we a perfect democracy? No, we're far from. But it is a process in development, and European citizenship must be a main factor in the evolution of the European Union, because from any in the evolution of the European Union, because as the Italians, Roberto will know, created their state, they said, we have created the state, now we must make citizens. So now at this moment in time, we have introduced European citizenship. Now we must, in line with Article 10 of the Treaty on European Union, we must empower the citizens to participate in the political life of their new polity. You cannot take democracy for granted. So my suggestion and my contribution is to this webinar and to the project of European citizenship education is to have a clear concept of the EU as a democratic union of democratic states, and have, as Roberto said, a multi-level citizenship, which is both on the level of your hometown, on the level of your region, on the level of your state, and on the level of the European Union, and combine that into something like what Suzanne and Sophie call a European citizenship education. Article 10 of the Lisbon Treaty should be the basis. It says that every citizen has the right to participate in the political life of the Union. So, following articles in the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, Article 163, should be implemented in the sense of the basic treaty, which is the Lisbon Treaty. So I hope the upcoming conference will provide us with an opportunity to implement this, because we need it for our future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jaap. Excellent presentation, and also very important takeaways. We are a democratic union, but imperfect, in the making, in development, and also with some problems in the democracy in some of the member states that we have to tackle too, I will add. And thank you very much for reminding us the importance of Article 10. Because as you said, Article 10 says that every citizen has the right to participate in the democratic life of the union. So in order to effectively participate into this democratic life, you made a very good point. You have to be endowed with the necessary skills and competencies, right, and information. So here we have an excellent legal basis. And then you also said something that is, I think, very important, which is the multi-level dimension. Of course, we are talking a lot about the European citizenship education, but this is part of a wider citizenship education, which is about your local, regional, national level, for sure. And we have also to look, when we look at the comparative studies, Professor Castaldi mentioned that European citizenship is not taught in all member states, and certainly not in a homogeneous or comparable way. But also maybe not all member states engage either in citizenship education at the national level, meaning, you know, the values of their own national constitutions, the rights in their constitutions, the electoral system at the national level, which is also very important. And then I will add the global dimension of citizenship, because we have rights that come from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Pacts on Civil Rights and Economic and Social Rights. So the whole, also the whole, I think, understanding of the world as a global community, no, in which we are part as an individual level, not only by the mediation of states or international organizations. So, yeah, you'd like to add something?
Yeah. If you allow me one line, theoretically, in the past generations, it was thought that you can only be citizen of a state. Now, the European Union has proven that you can be citizen of a state and of a multinational, transnational polity. So if citizenship can work at the level of the European Union, it should be, in principle, also be possible to make the citizens of the member states of the United Nations world citizens. And that would be a next step in the process that started with Immanuel Kant and his Zum ewigen Frieden.
Very good point. And Jaap, you had used up only 7 minutes of your time, so your line was totally in line with the rules. Was not a bonus. Very well. So I think this is coming along very nicely. I think it will be nice if after today you can you can submit your ideas in 1 or 2 pages, and we can produce a booklet with all the interventions. Now I give the floor to Marta Fuentes. Marta is from Spain. It's very important to have also, I think, the view of
Dominic, I think we don't hear you.
Yes,
We
there's
can't
no
hear you,
audio.
Dominic.
Dominic, your mic.
Membership of former Erasmus students across
Yes.
Europe has recently published the paper Good Practices for Building European Citizenship. So I think this is very timely. The paper states we want European citizenship as a mandatory subject. So this is music to my ears. I've been asking the Commission for almost 5 years in different pilot projects that we have to develop a demonstrative curriculum on European citizenship education or global European and global citizenship education, as we were just saying, from JAP. I always emphasize that demonstrative, so for allowing those member states that are willing to implement it to do it. But the Commission, and I still don't understand it, keeps saying that, yeah, this is like going too far, this is like being intrusive, telling member states what to do. But I say, well, but it's what telling them what they can do in the field of your expertise, European citizenship education. But anyway, Marta, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you for your commitment, for your work, and for these bold proposals from Erasmus Student Network that I'm sure you can explain to us more in detail for 10 minutes.
So, hi everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Dominic for inviting the Erasmus Student Network Spain to this webinar, giving us the opportunity to share with all of you the vision of the Erasmus generation that I think it's really important in this topic. I have to start saying that I think all Europeans, both institutions, but also the citizens, agrees that the European program is the biggest success of the European Union. It is also the best tool that we have nowadays to create European citizens, because it's one of the objectives of the programs. For example, the resolution that the European Parliament launched in 2019 about European citizenship said specifically that the program contribute to raise awareness about the condition of the people taking part in a mobility of their European citizenship, but also to improve their knowledge about what it brings to them, this citizenship, rights, values, and also the knowledge of European Union. So it's really important to engage with the program and to take in account that nowadays is the best thing we have to create this knowledge about the topic of European citizenship. But also surveys and studies confirm this. People that take part in an Erasmus feel more European after their mobility. We in ESN did a survey in 2019 on the occasion of the European elections, just checking if people take part more after a mobility in the civic society, in elections. And we confirm that if you are like EU citizens that take part in Erasmus, afterwards they vote more in both national and European elections. But which is more important, they feel more European citizens, and they ask for more rights as EU citizens, which is really, really important. And also they ask for more European civic education in schools. So that means that when you have the chance to meet Europe, then you realize what it offers you, and then you ask and you engage more with European Union. And then because of that, it's really important to educate about it, because we have realized that people that have this experience, then they really want to take part in our European society, which I think it's the biggest barrier that we have nowadays when we are talking about European citizenship. So we have Erasmus, more than 30 years of history. We have 10 million of participants, and we have created this belonging, this feeling of belonging to Europe. We have created what we call in ESN the Erasmus generation, people that have learned our values. They have a very important thing that is intercultural understanding, and they are the real meaning of unity in diversity that we a lot of times talk about it, but we don't really a lot of times know what it means. So I would like to also share with you one of the best practices that we have in ESN. Is one of the practices that we have included in the position paper that Dominic just mentioned that we have launched a couple of days ago. And this activity is called Erasmus in Schools. Basically, we take some Erasmus students and we bring them to local schools in order to have the chance to meet with local students. So they have the chance to talk about their country, their culture, their language with local students. So we create an agora of European people talking about this diversity that we have in Europe. And we have also adapted this activity to high schools, to young people from 16 to 18. So there we explain them what the European Union is, all the opportunities, like amazing opportunities that the European Union has, that not a lot of people, of course, the ones that we are here, of course, we know Erasmus, European Solidarity Corps, Discover EU, all these amazing programs that the EU is funding. But when we go to the local level, not a lot of people know about them. Of course, they know about Erasmus, this program for universities, people go to party, and this is not the reality. So it's important to go to schools, high schools, and explain everything that the EU has to offer them. And I have to say, it's one of the most inspiring and satisfying activities that we have in ESN, because then you have a lot of young people approaching to you and thank you for going there, explaining everything, and they are like, oh my God, I really want to go and discover Europe now. So this is really satisfactory for us to have the chance to in this situation that we don't have that much education about Europe, giving opportunities to and open the doors to Europe to a lot of local students. So this experience makes us to believe that it is of a huge importance to educate young people about the EU, explaining them why they are European citizens, because it's nice that the treaty says that we all are European citizens, but people don't know that they are, or they don't feel engaged with that citizenship. They need to know about the rights, how the EU works, what it can offer them. I think that the turnover in the past elections increased in the young people, but we don't have to just believe that now everything is okay, young people are more engaged. We need to still work on this, and it's important that we educate about their rights and values. We are talking about the Conference on the Future of Europe. It's now one of the highlights of the EU. And the EU institution has specifically said, and I quote, young Europeans play a central role in shaping the future of the European project. But how can they play that role if they don't know what Europe is, that they have a central role in shaping it? Like they need to be educated in order to take part in this conference. So we need to improve this education, and this is our biggest claim in ESN. In Spain, for example, we only have one region, Madrid, that has an optative subject focus on European Union in high school. Another one has announced it, that is Cantabria, but the rest of people, or the ones that they are not choosing this subject, they are not learning about European Union. So how they are going to feel engaged, or how they are recognize themselves as European citizens. So this is important. So our biggest recommendation, as a lot of you have already mentioned, is to have a curriculum proposal from the European Union in order to have a base, so the member states can implement this formal education in schools So all our youngsters in Europe are in the same condition. It's not fair that some countries have already implemented this education, but we have others that doesn't, because then we will have a problem in the future of generations that are not feeling really engaged with Europe at the same level. But we also need to claim about non-formal and informal education. As I mentioned, in ESN, we are really good in this type of activities, and they are really, really important to create this feeling of belonging. Not everything happens in class, in a formal education space. So it's important when we talk about education to have to take in account these other areas of education. And also it's important to create spaces for debate, for Europeans to debate, not us that we are in the European bubble, but also the ones at the local level that they don't have this close relationship with Europe. They also need to take part in spaces of debate, so they recognize themselves as citizens and they see why it's important to debate. So I think this is almost everything I wanted to share with you, and I could be glad to answer any question or comment that you have.
Thank you very much, Marta. I think, again, very concrete ideas. Thank you also for the work that you do from Erasmus Student Network. And of course, at the beginning, you describe a sort of, I noted here, a virtuous circle, no? Like if you you have benefited from Erasmus, then you're more likely also to favor, you are going to have a stronger feeling of European citizenship, but you are also going to be in favor of more programs and of more maybe European citizenship education subject, and so on and so forth. And of course, you also mentioned a critical point that we have to emphasize now that the conference on the future of Europe is about to start. It seems very clear that one of the elements of this conference is going to be a panel of randomly selected citizens with also an important youth component. And we need to provide to these citizen participants, which are going to be from every walks of life, which is very good, some basic induction on European citizenship, because or European content, because otherwise I don't think they will benefit. And I've been told my screen is not working. Can you see me? You can see me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, very well. So now I was saying that we need to provide with some very basic understanding and skills to these participants in order to, properly benefit from this experience and to have, I think, a meaningful outcome of the discussion. And of course, on the idea of the curriculum, I think it's again perfectly within the treaties to propose a demonstrative curriculum. If the Commission still doesn't do it, I think it's for a political reason, but nothing. Or there is some national government somewhere that feels offended by a proposal coming from the Commission. I think, we are already grown-ups. One shouldn't be so scared, no, from being bold and innovative in such an important field, if we believe in what is said in Article 10 of the treaty, as Jeff was reminding us. Okay, now we have 30 minutes, which I think is a good amount of time for questions from the audience. I think some people, we have encouraged the audience to send the questions through the chat. So I don't know if some questions have already been posted in the chat. Let me check with my team. ¿Hay preguntas en el chat? Okay, pero ya las tengo que tener. Okay, I think some questions have come in, but I still don't have them. So I don't know. In the meantime, if if anyone from the audience would like to take the floor directly, because I still don't have the list of questions from the chat.
I'm happy to make a start maybe on the last question which has just come in on global citizenship education. So I can answer this from my perspective, or from what we've suggested, is that when we do develop a strategy for citizenship education at the European level, this should naturally very much include also the global level. And we should not make the mistake, which maybe currently some education systems at the national level make, to only focus on their very specific level. But especially when we look at the challenges which we are currently experiencing, so whether it's climate change, or also global pandemias. These are global developments, and they very much also rely on citizens' understanding of global social and political systems. So I would wish for the EU to, from the very start, focus on covering very much how all levels are interconnected, and not develop a for example, strategy which is exclusively focused on the European dimension, but cover, more comprehensively all of them.
Yes. Yep.
Yes, because Marta inspired me to share the basic experience that I had in doing European citizenship education with the game for about 30 years, when the pupils in the classroom where I went to play the game and discuss the EU, which, by the way, could also something for the panel, which is coming up, then they were asked by a journalist, what have you learned today by playing this silly game? And the reply of was invariably, no, I don't know whether I've learned anything, but I've become European. And that is the effect, I think, that Marta was also looking at. When you go to schools, you have to not only address the pupils, but you also have to give them the chance to be actively involved in making their own reality. And that is what, in some way or another, the game wonderfully does. So, Marta, when you go again in the school, the rules are in all languages of the EU. So that's basically the experience. You become European by playing the game. Thank you.
Okay, well, we have already some of the questions from the chat. Well, it's a bit generic. Maybe this could also be taken up by Roberto or Jab, and is more to say more things, to expand on the dimension of global citizenship.
As I mentioned before, the issue is a multi-level citizenship. We live in a complex and interdependent world, and we need to be, as citizens, able to use our rights and take responsibility at different levels of government, from the local level to the global level. So the issue of, I don't think we can conceptualize European citizenship education as something different and separated from an idea of multi-level citizenship, which means that it must include also the global level. This is also related to the fact that if we look, for instance, at the Eurobarometer, on the one hand, it says that people know very little about the EU. On the other, we see that the area in which citizens ask for more European Union action is the global level, is the global challenges. Citizens ask for the EU to be more active on security, environment, climate change, the big global challenges, where they feel that they cannot make a difference at the local or national level. So this is also a way to strengthen the idea that we need different levels of government to cope with different challenges. And this is what the European Union is all about, in a sense.
Okay, very well. Any other comment on global citizenship from the panelists? Jap?
My hope is, and I think it's also a responsibility for us, is that we avoid with world citizenship what has happened to Europe. Because in Europe, we only started to realize that the world had become too small for absolute sovereignty exercise from sovereign states. But we needed two wars in Europe in order to make us realize that we had to change the Westphalian, change our behavior, had to change the character of international relation. And I think the example that the lesson that Europe has learned by two world wars should not be repeated at the global level. We should not have a global war before we have global citizenship. It is possible and we can do it. Europe may be an example.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, let me see if we have another question from the chat. Okay. How to deal with working in this topic on this topic of European citizenship education? How to deal? Maybe this is a good question also for Suzanne. How to deal with Eurosceptic national governments?
Yeah, so when we proposed the European agency, this was actually also a little bit in mind with what is currently happening in some Eurosceptic member states. So, for example, in Hungary and Poland, we have had a lot of reports on, say, Erasmus Plus funding not being distributed equally to all kinds of organizations, civil society organizations, but that, yeah, governments were only distributing funding to those which were sort of in line with their own agenda. And we very much need to strengthen those organizations and civil society actors in those member states which are willing to, for example, engage in citizenship education, which is not Eurosceptic, but which is based on our common understanding of values and how the EU works, and it being a democratic union. So, in a sense, our proposal addresses this issue that if we at the European level don't provide funding and support for national organizations which engage in citizenship education, we might see that those organizations will struggle to survive if the Eurosceptic atmosphere continues in those member states. Of course, it's also a little bit historic that some member states are skeptical about citizenship education. For example, in Poland, I was often told that this is something very much associated with indoctrination, as it used to be, say, in the communist times as a school subject. But this is also something we need to address at the European level. We need to think about how can we, first of all, establish a common understanding of what is citizenship education. It's of course not a PR. It's not teaching people what to believe. It's teaching them to critically question, to engage, to form their own understanding also. And if we can get this across, then I think we will have people on our side to engage in this education subject.
Yep, very well, Susanna. fully agree with that. Okay, there are no more questions, so I will move to the conclusion. Okay, yes, Jab, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to Suzanne that this approach of the EU as a dual democracy, a democracy on the level of the member states and a democracy on the level of the Union, makes it possible to address deficiencies in the member states that should, like the European Commission is already trying to do now with the rule of law mechanism, that can be done on condition that the democratic functioning of the Union is beyond reproach. The Union should give the example of how a transnational democracy can function, and the member states have to fit in, have to play their role in enabling the EU to become to function as a democratic, as a transnational democracy. So European democracy, and I say this as the author of the book, is for me the system of governance for the European Union as a union of democratic states based on the rule of law, which also forms a constitutional democracy of its own. That gives you the moral power to address the member states. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah.
If I may, there was a
Yes, please go ahead. Go ahead, Roberto.
About how to avoid young people that still cannot vote to get a strip of their citizenship like it happened in the UK. Now, unfortunately, there is no way, in the sense that if a referendum takes place in any country to activate Article 50 and secede from the Union, it will be up to that member state to decide who is going to vote. Now, the issue with the British referendum is probably a different one. I mean, we cannot avoid the fact that in all member states there is an age threshold to vote. What was astonishing in the British referendum is that there was a clear choice to avoid the possibility for the people most influenced by the decision to vote. Because as you know, in the British referendum, the British citizen residents abroad could not vote, and at the same time, the European citizen residents in the UK could not vote either. So the two categories most influenced by the decision, and we are talking about a few millions people that were essentially disenfranchised, could not vote, and this would have made a very significant difference on the outcome of the referendum. And these were the people that, with the victory of Brexit, would lose all their rights as European citizens of residence in another country, both the British citizen elsewhere and European citizen in the UK. So that was absolutely an astonishing decision. At the same time, there was no judicial remedy available for those citizens and for the EU as the treaty stands today. So from that point of view, unfortunately, there was no possibility for the EU to intervene to safeguard the rights of citizens as treaty stands. On the other issue about what should the curriculum include, well, there was some work done in the pilot project in Italy, and the curriculum was a vertical curriculum that started from the elementary school from 6 to 10 years to the what in Italy is called middle school from 11 to 13, and to the high school from 14 to 18. And there were different issues. So in the elementary school, you would work more on aspects like the symbols and the identity and values, while you would work more on history and institutional work and challenges in the medium and high school. Again, there were also a number of suggestions regarding methodology in order to have not just traditional teaching, but exercises of active citizenship, debate, and so on. But of course, these end games. but these were tailored differently according to the age of the student to be involved in the various activities. And while regarding the issue of implementation, now implementation is always the most difficult part, and we must be aware of two issues. To be successful, we need to think, in my view, about a strategy that includes some relatively small, centralized activity, and many more bottom-up initiative and cooperation with the member states. Because as things stand, the competence is mainly with the member states. But we should not forget that beside the legal aspect, there is a political aspect. I mean, the Erasmus is probably the most well-known and most successful program in the EU, and is based on a support competence. So support competence can be used effectively if there is the political will and the cooperation of the member states. There is no reason why on European multi-level citizenship we couldn't get an effective cooperation with member states, provided the Union is able to conceptualize and present its activity as a support and a synergic tool, offering instruments and so on that complement what is already done at national level. While if we go to with a view of ignoring what is already happening at national level, or thinking a brand new system and trying to impose it on the member states, I think we are doomed to failure.
Okay, so I'm going to move to the conclusions, but thank you for that, Roberto. But before, a question of my own to Marta, also because she has not spoken too much in the questions and answers, but because I'm interested in knowing, could you envision also linking somehow delivery of European citizenship education content to the experience of Erasmus in another member state? Meaning, again, I am Erasmus student in Italy, going from Madrid, and I arrive in Siena, and I start my course of my fast course in my intensive course in Italian upon arrival. This happened to me 20 years ago. And is it possible that we could also say, okay, now you're also going to take during this semester or this year some content on citizenship education in addition to, my content in my, degree of economics or engineering? Or what are your views or thoughts on that?
So it's really interesting because we have the Erasmus program has few mandatory things that you need to do to receive the grant, but one of them is, for example, that you need to take a test at the beginning and at the end of your mobility in the language that you are studying. This is made through a system called the online linguistic support. So the Commission has a online platform where you can make this test. So this is the few mandatory things that you have to do. So we could implement a new platform in order to test this European knowledge, because as I said, when you do a mobility, you feel more European afterwards. So I think it could be really interesting to also test this change, but also to teach these people doing a mobility. If the European Union is putting money on creating European citizens, why not also putting money on educating them using a mandatory system, let's say, while they are on Erasmus, and they can, what we were talking, that sometimes the member states can be a little bit difficult to implement subjects. well, you have a program, you have people taking part on it, then put a mandatory test or a mandatory lessons about European Union topics. You can also have universities implementing courses on European Union and then convincing them to then agree on accepting this ECTS in the learning agreement of the students. I mean, there's a lot of ways that how we can implement European citizenship education while in Erasmus, but we need political intention to do so. We need the Commission having the decision to, for example, creating this platform. We need the universities to accept that they can convalidate some ECTS for European Union learning. So I think there's multiple ways that the only thing, and they don't need necessarily a lot of money. They need the political intention to teach students about the European Union. And I think that is the first thing that we need to change.
Excellent points, Marta. Thank you very much. And I see there are all signs of agreement among the co-panelists. I think you have said all many complementary and useful things. And I have now it's time for the conclusions, but also to thank you very warmly, of course. As I said before, I'll be delighted to publish a small booklet with the works of this webinar. So if you're interested, please send us in, since you were able to speak about 10 minutes, that probably is 1-2 pages. You don't need to make a whole chapter, because with what you said in 10 minutes was very useful, very concrete things that we can implement, because as a policymaker, I'm interested in concrete actions, and there are concrete ideas that we can put into practice. Maybe 2 takeaways from my side, because are connected to things that you said. Roberto mentioned also as one of the elements the European Heritage Label. And I think we should develop, and I'd like to make this proposal to the Commission, within that a sub-label of European Integration Heritage Label. So we can showcase specifically the memory sites, the sites of the memory, and personalities of the European memory that are specifically connected to the construction of the Union. Then I don't know if it was Susanne or Marta that referred to the question of European citizenship at the local level, delivery at the local level with the municipalities. And in this respect, I tabled last year a pilot project that was accepted, which is called BELE, Building Europe with Local Entities, which specifically aims to creating spaces for training, but also debate and information on European issues at the very local level, also in the very small municipalities. Then, as a general conclusion, I will say that everything that you say, I think, comes together very nicely. Of course, we can debate whether it's better an agency or a unit, but I like, or more realistic also. But the idea of the agency, I think it's very appealing, because the current agency deals with many different topics, including culture, which is connected in a way, but also not connected when you are looking at cultural industries and so on. If we go for an agency, we're sending a very strong political signal of commitment. And this is where we have probably in the field of European citizenship education, we have the biggest gap in reality, because particularly after the Euro crisis, it was very clear that many citizens were blaming Europe, whatever that means as a whole, for all sorts of things, whether in fields in which the Union had competencies or not, whether in the fields in which the Parliament was not participating in the decision, and the decisions were taken only by the Council, without any consideration of what political majorities in the different institutions were taking these decisions. And that had a devastating effect. Now, I have here in my notes that apparently President Biden of the US said in the, because he attended the European Council meeting yesterday, and apparently he said in Washington, it might not be clear what the European Council does, okay? So if by Washington he refers to the American political class, well, imagine the common citizen in the EU, no? What his understanding or her understanding is without providing the necessary skills. So we have this, but of course, if we have an agency, we can work on developing many things, including the demonstrative curriculum with participation of national experts. Then we have the ideas of Marta and Roberto regarding linking as a requirement, citizenship education with the social fund, the Erasmus program, very concrete, actionable ideas. Then JAP is reminding us that we have a legal base to do any of these things. Article 10 of the treaty, very important point. And also he developed bureaucracy, which shows us that there are many ways to teach about European citizenship. It's not just in a formal lesson, but this could be very useful in schools throughout Europe and also in city councils. So all in all, I think this comes out as a very nice, now we have put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and I think the final picture is a very, very good one. And now I just want to thank you again, encourage to do this, to put together this report, so I can then, with other colleagues in the parliament, try to influence, the next policy decisions in this very important field, which is as strategic. It should not be underestimated. This is as strategic as having a joint, pan-European electoral constituency for the European elections, or empowering Parliament to vote on debt and taxes in the recovery plan. It's as strategic as any of the things that you can think. Thank you very much also to the audience. We had over 30 people with us today, which also shows the interest this topic is arising. And want to thanks to Susan, to Roberto, to Jab, to Marta. I hope to see you soon in person, and I remain here open to your ideas and hopefully also to your writings.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.